Okay, so we're picking up on Daf Tes Zayin and Aleph. Yesterday we identified a stira between a Mishnah in Tamid and a Mishnah in Midos regarding the location of the of the Lishkas Hatzlaim, the chamber where the sheep were kept for the Korban Tamid. So we answered that the the Mishnah in Midos is going like a very specific Tana, which is not necessarily the mainstream opinion of the regular Mishnayos, and that's of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that Midos follows the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. That was what Mafuna said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. I'm Mafuna Mantana Midos Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov piece, and I was going to bring a proof that the Mishnayos and Midos go like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, because we have a Mishnah here talks about the dimensions of the Ezras Noshim and the various chambers that were located on the 4 quadrants of the Ezras Noshim. And then we'll see as we go along that it's really Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov who's the one who's talking, and he's giving his recollection as to what the various chambers are. So that shows that the Stam Tana of Maseches Midos is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. The Tanan Mishnah says, "Ezras Noshim Ma'isa Meir Shloshim B'Chamesh Shamei Bochum Meir Shloshim B'Chamesh." The length and the width of the Ezras Noshim in the base of Mikdash was 135 amos by 135 amos. So Abelishka Siyubadamik Soser. And on the 4 corners and the 4 quadrants of the Ezras Noshim, there were 4 chambers. Mayu Mishtamshos. What were they used for? In Jeromis Mizrachis, the southeast corner. Here I saw Lishkas and Nazirim. This is where the Nazirim would cook that they would take their haircuts and they would cook their korban shlomim. There was a requirement that the cauldron that was cooking the korban shlomim, underneath it, that's where they would place their hair. Here I saw Lishkas Hanazivim Shisham Nazim Avashim Mishamen Megalchin Asara, and they would cut their hair Mishachan Tachasudud, and they would place the hair underneath the cauldron. So that was in the southeast corner. Now going northward towards the northeast corner, Mizrachas Tzvonis, here is Lishkas Dira Eitzim Sham Kohanim Balimumin Omdin Maslin Be'eitzim. That's where the Kohanim it was the chamber of the wood, with the Kohanim who couldn't do avoda because they were blemished, they were Balimumin, so they would go and they would be in that chamber, and they had a job. Their job was to check all the wood to make sure that the wood was not wormy. So they would examine the wood for that purpose to make sure that they had appropriate wood to be placed on the maracha, on the pyre, on the mizbeach, on the altar. Any wood that was wormy would be invalidated to use on the maracha. Sephonis maravis, walking alongside the northern the northern side. So when you go from northeast to northwest, the northwestern the chamber. Here I said Lishkas HaMitzorayim. That's where the Mitzorayim would go, and they would bring their kapara after they had become Torah from being a Mitzorah, so that they would have their final Tevila in that Lishka. Maravis Deromis, and then moving alongside, going from north to south on the western side, so you get to the southwestern corner. So here, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov pipes up, so it shows that up until now, it must be that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov was speaking. I'm Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Shachachli ma'aseh shemeshes. I don't remember what that was used for. I don't remember what that chamber was used for. So we see that the whole Mishnah is going like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So Abba Shol Omer, so Abba Shol actually did have a suggestion, or it did have a recollection as to what it was used for. He says that the southwest corner, that's where they would store the wine and the oil used for libations, because of the fact that they kept the oil there, so it was called the chamber of the oil. So now the Gemara is going to give another raya that makes sense that the Tana of Maseches Midos is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Because the Mishnah says that all of the walls leading to the Har HaBayis were very tall. How you givoin, but one of them had to be a little smaller, a little shorter, so that the Kohen who would be burning the parah would be able to look straight into the heichal, because he was supposed to be able to look straight into what was going on in the innermost portions of the Beis HaMikdash, going into the heichal. And if the wall on the eastern side, because he was facing towards the east, Remember, the entranceway into the Beis Hamikdash was basically the eastern side, and then you would walk towards the west. You would get to the Azara, you would get to the Heichal, you get to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, moving east to west, and he would be on the eastern side of the Beis Hamikdash, burning the parah and doing the hazos, the sprinklings of the mechatos. So he would have to, according to Xeris Hakasuk, he would have to be able to look straight into the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, the eastern wall leading to the Har HaBayis had to be a little bit shorter, so he'd be able to see above it to look into the Heichal. Chutz mikotza mizrachi shekayna sot v'sapara. Omeid b'Har HaMishcha, he would stand in the Har HaMishcha, burning the parah. Miskavin roa keneged piskol shel Heichal b'shas hazos adam. When he would sprinkle, actually the blood, he would sprinkle the blood of the paraduma. The pasuk speaks about him. It says v'hizah el nochach pnei oel moed. That's the pasuk with respect to his preparing the paraduma. So he would have to be able to look straight into the Beis Hamikdash area. For that reason, the wall would need to be shorter. So who is it who would require the wall to be shorter? It was only Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, as we'll see. There were gates that led to the Har HaBayis on all of the different sides, and the gates themselves were open, and they were 20 amos tall. So if you would have been able to just see, say the Kohen would have been able to just see through the gates, then he didn't have to worry about looking above the wall, because he could have just looked straight through the gates. But if the gates were completely covered up or obscured, because of the fact that there was an elevation leading to the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. So if you look through the gate, you wouldn't see anything in terms of the activity of the Beis Hamikdash. So then he would need to look over the wall, and then it was necessary for the wall to be shorter. And who holds that the elevation was high enough so that he wouldn't have been able to see through the gate? That only makes sense, as we'll see, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Amos, and the gates were 10 amos wide, but for our purposes, what we mostly care about is that they're 20 amos tall. Tanan, Mishnah says that as you're going, as you're walking towards the Beis Hamikdash, in terms of the dimensions, inside the walls of the Har HaBayis Soreg, there was a wooden lattice work that was kind of like 10 amos away from when you start going into the Azaros. And that was the point in which, if you have a Tamei Meis, as we know, is allowed to walk in the Har HaBayis. That's why there are people nowadays, even though we assume everybody is Tamei Meis, so people who go to the Har HaBayis, because only a Zav of Balkari can't be in the Har HaBayis, because they're prohibited from being even in Machane Levia location. So they're not allowed to be in the Har HaBayis. So, but they can go to the mikveh in order to purify themselves from their tumah. So that's why people go to the mikveh. Then they go up to Har HaBayis, because the Tamei Meis is allowed to be in the Har HaBayis. He's allowed, but as soon as you get up to the Soeg, even though it's not the Machane Shechina yet, because you're not in the Azaros, but nonetheless, we have a chumrah that we say that once you reach this wooden lattice work, so Tamei Meis Midrabanan is not allowed to go beyond that point. Some people nowadays say we don't know exactly where there is. That's one of the considerations as to why most of the poskim are not so comfortable with going up to Har HaBayis, because how do you know exactly the point beyond which you can't go any further? Maybe you'll mess up. And then there's this area beyond the Soeg, beyond that wooden lattice, frame that is sort of like an additional fence. So then there's the area known as the Chel. It's not yet to the Azara area, but it's this 10 amos area, again, with somebody who's telling me is not allowed to go. Malos, but here's what's relevant for our discussion, is that there were steps. So the steps elevate to the floor of the Beis Hamikdash area. There were 12 steps. They were each one a half an amma tall. So that's a total of 6 amos of elevation. You have to keep track of the math, 6 amos. Each one was a half an amma deep, a half an amma long. Tesva malos olos mitocha, and then there were 15 additional malos, shir hamalos, right? 15 shir hamalos. There were 15 additional steps to get you from the Ezras Nashim up to the Ezras Yisrael. Tesva malos olos mitocha yeredis me'esras Yisrael le'esras ha'noshim hu malach chatzi amma. Each one is a half an amma tall. The shilcha chatzi amma is half an amma long. So that's again 15 divided by 2. If each one was a half an amma, that's another 7.5 ammas. So if 6 ammas plus 6 ammas plus 7.5 ammas equal 13.5 ammas. So already I have an elevation of 13.5 ammas. I've obscured 13.5 amos out of the 20 amos of open space that you would have otherwise been able to see through the gate leading to the shower, the opening area leading into the Harabayas on the east side. If you're going from the Ulam to the Mizbeach, okay, that's a 22 amma incline or elevation. And there were another 12 malos that were over there. 12 more steps. Amma, each one is a half an amma and half an amma high. Amma and a half an amma long. So this is another 6 ammas. So it's just 12 steps of a half an amma, each is another 6 ammas. That gets me from 13.5 ammas to 19.5 amos. So once I'm already at the point of 19.5 amos, this is, going from the Mizbeach to the Ulam. So now I'm practically, now if the Kohen needed to see straight into the Heichal, so he only has a half an amma that he's able to see. Okay, a half an amma, it's still a foot or so he's still able to see a tiny bit. But that works out if you're not Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. But if you're Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, then the elevation is even higher than 19.5 amos because he has another amma, and actually he has another 2.5 amos. But tonight, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, he says that there was another malo, there was another step in the Zora, in the Ezra Sisra on the courtyard. There was also an amma tall. The ducha nasan oleh, and then you had the podium and nasan oleh. The podium in which you would have a special duchen. Uvo shalosh malos shochatzi chatzi amma, and on it there were 3 additional steps of a half an amma and half an amma each. And altogether that adds up, as the Tosas Yishanim says over here, to another 2.5 amos, because you have 3 steps of a half an amma, and you have that mala, and you have that elevation of the duchen, which is 1 amos. That's another 2.5 amos. So you were already up to 19.5 amos. So according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the elevation is 22 amos. So now you wouldn't, if the Kohen looked through the shar, he looked through the opening of the gate leading to Harabayas, he wouldn't see anything. Everything would be completely obscured in terms of being able to see the Heichal. So he needs to see above the gate, but above the gate we have a wall, and the wall is going to obscure his view. So therefore we need the wall to be relatively short so that the Kohen will be able to look over the wall into the Heichal, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So Yamis, Bishlam Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So now we understand. If we say that the Mishnah that says that all the psachim that all the ksalim that were there, or the walls that were above the gates leading to the Harabayas were Geboa and were tall chutz mikosa mizrachi, except for the eastern wall, because the Kohen needed to be able to look above the wall into the Heichal. So now we understand that makes sense according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Hanu de Exilei Pischa, because the Pesach, or the opening of the gate, was completely obscured by the 22 amos elevation. But if you hold like the Chachamim, the elevation only took you up 19.5 amos, and then the Kohen would have been able to look straight through the opening of the gate, and the wall wouldn't have mattered 1 iota. The wall could be as tall as you want it to be, because he could have looked through the gate. So therefore, that proves that the Mishnayos, so this once again proves that the Mishnayos of Midos are going according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So Rav Rava throws in a monkey wrench, and he says, no, Hamani, Rabbi Yehuda. He says that he thinks that you can say that it's going like Rabbi Yehuda, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, you would have had the gate obscured not merely through the elevations, but it would have been obscured through the Mizbeach, because Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that the Mizbeach was sort of, blocked, would have blocked the vision that the Kohen had of the Heichal if he just, would have looked through in that direction. Haman Rabbi Yehudi, the Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hamizbeach Mutza Ba'omni Be'emsa Azara, that the Mizbeach was smack center in the middle of the Azara, and it was 32 amos wide, and Eser Amos, and the mizbeach also was tall. It was 9 amos tall plus the horns on the sides, but that would have obscured the Kohen's view if he would have just been looking through the opening of the gate. The mizbeach would have obscured his view, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Let's turn the page. Eser Amos keneged pistol shel hecho. So the mizbeach was 32 amos wide. So that would be 10 amos that would correspond to the Pesach of the Heichal, the opening up of the Heichal, the entranceway into the Heichal was 10 amos wide. Yuda Aleph Amma L'Safon, Yuda Aleph Amma L'Daram. The entire Heichal was 20 amos wide, so 10 amos would take you through the opening of the Heichal, and then there was another 5 amos on either side of the inner space of the Heichal that was, obviously bounded by a wall if you're coming in from the Azara into the Heichal. And then there was another 6 amos beyond that was kind of like the thickness of the wall on the northern and southern sides of the Heichal. So altogether, that would the entire extension of the Mizbeach would take you, through that entire distance. The middle of the Mizbeach would take you through the 10 amos of the opening into the Heichal, and then 11 amos in the northern direction would correspond to the additional 5 amos of the Heichal that's would be concealed by a wall, and the 6 amos of the thickness of the northern wall, and then on the southern side, 5 amos would take you through the southern side of the Heichal that would be concealed by a wall, plus the additional 6 amos of the thickness of the wall of the Heichal on the southern side. So Yud Amos Aleph Amos L'Tzafim Yud Aleph Amos L'Daram Nimsam is back Mikuma Keneged Heichal B'Koslo. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, that would explain. You could say the midos is going like Rabbi Yehuda. And that would explain why you needed the Kohen to look over the wall in order to look into the Heichal, because he wouldn't have been able to look through the gate because the Mizbeach would have concealed his view, because the Mizbeach was situated right in front of the Pesach, the opening to the Heichal. So that would have obscured his view. So according to this reading of the Gemara, there is an alternative reading of the Gemara, according to Rashi on Yud Zayin and Aleph, but according to this reading of the Gemara, the next words of the Gemara are a kasha, which is a little bit difficult because it doesn't read like a kasha. It doesn't sound like it's a kasha what we just said. It sounds like it's a continuation of what we just said. But according to this interpretation, which is the entire, Rashi, the Gemara and Rashi here on Tes Zayin and Aleph and Tes Zayin and Beis, it's a kasha. You say, no, you can't say like Ravada Rabba is suggesting that the Mishnayos and Midos are going like Rabbi Yehuda. That can't be. Midos Rabbi Yehuda. You want to argue that the Mishnayos and Midos are going according to Rabbi Yehuda. That doesn't work according to the Mishnayos and Midos, because what's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that the Mizbeach is smack in the middle of the Azara, and that's why it obscures the view into the opening of the Heichal. But we don't find in Maseches Midos that, according to the calculations in Maseches Midos, and yes, I'm sorry, there will be some more calculations now, we don't find that it works out according to Rabbi Yehuda's view, because according to the calculations of Maseches Midos, it turns out that the vast majority of the Mizbeach is actually on the southern side of the Azara, as opposed to being smack in the center. How do we see that? That the dimensions of the Azara were 187 amos going from the east side to the west side, and 135 amos going from the north side to the south side. That's pretty consistent, right? That we have the 135 amos going from north to south. We had that with respect to the Esros Nashim as well. So Mina Mizrach Lemarav, so going from the eastern side to the western side, that's not so much our concern right now, because we're concerned about what's in the middle, going from the northern side to the southern side. But we'll mention this too, just to be thorough. So Mina Mizrach Lemarav, from the eastern side to the western side, as you're walking more from the Azara going towards the Heichal. Meo Shmonim B'Sheva is 187 amos. Malcolm Drisas Ragli Yisrael Yud Aleph, the place where the non-Kohanim Yisraelim were allowed to hang out was the first 11 amos. That's 11 Yud Aleph Amma. Welcome Drisas Raglei Kohanim Yud Aleph Amma. The place where the Kohanim would do a lot of their avoda would be in the next 11 amos. That's 22 amos. Mizbeach Shoshim Mushtayim. Mizbeach took up another 32. That's 54. Bein ulam the mizbeach esum mushtayim, between the mizbeach and the ulam area, which is sort of like the hallowed area going from the mizbeach towards the heichal. That's another esum mushtayim, 76. The heichal kufama, the heichal then is the we're going to count that area as well in the overall dimensions here. The heichal was another 100 amos. That gets us to 176. And then there was another 11 amos that gets us to 187. That was on the western side of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, going, towards the rest of the area of the Beis Hamikdash until you got to the outer wall of the Beis Hamikdash area, the Harabayas area. So then you had an additional 11 amos behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim on the western side. So minha daram latzafon, and what about and we had you had chambers there, so we're counting those areas. It wasn't just like open outdoor space; there were chambers. So minha daram latzafon me'er shloshim v'chamesh. So from now, what we're mostly concerned about is from the northern side to the southern side. So here's where Rabbi Yehuda held that the Mizbeach was smack dab in the middle. And we're pointing out that according to the Mishnah, it's going to turn out that it's not true, that the Mishnayos and Midos indicate that the Mizbeach was mostly on the southern side. Minadaram Letzaf and Meir Shloshim Mechamesh was a total of 135 amos. So let's go from, we'll go from the southern side to the northern side. So going from the southern side to the northern side, Hakevesh Mizbeach Shishim Mushtayim, the Kevesh and the Mizbeach, the ramp leading to the Mizbeach, and the Mizbeach itself covered a total of 62 amas. Now, there was empty space between the southern wall and the ramp, but that we haven't fully calculated. That we're going to have to estimate. We're going to have to figure that out later. But here's what we do know so far. We know that the Kevesh and the Mizbeach took up 62 amos. From the Mizbeach to the Tabaos, to the area where you had rings that were set up where the necks of the animals that were going to be slaughtered would be slipped into those rings to make it easier to slaughter them. That's another 8 amos. That's 70. Makom Tabos, Esrim Ve'aba. The place where the Tabos were situated took up another 24 amos. So that gets me to what, 94? Mina Tabos, the Shulchanos, from the Tabos to the Shulchanos, you had tables where they would wash the intestines of the Korbanos. That is another arba. What do we have so far? We have 60. We have 62. Plus we have 70. Plus we have 94, and now we have 98. Mina shulchanos lenanasin, from the tables to the nanasin. The nanasin were various posts where they would hang the animals on hooks, and they would flay them. They would flay their hides over there. That was abba. That's another 4, as that gets us to 102. Mina nanasin, the kotel, from the nanasin to the kotel hazara, to the wall, the northern wall of the hazara was another ches amos. That's 110 altogether. So wait, that's 110. We said that the entire expanse, the entire area from the northern side to the southern side is 135 amos, right? So we have another 25 amos that we have to fill in. The amos are, so what we have to fill in are really 3 different spaces that weren't described if you were keeping track. We didn't describe how much space was between the southern wall and the ramp, and we didn't describe specifically on the northern side exactly how much space was taken up by the shulchanos, by the tables themselves in which the intestines were washed, and by the nanasin, and by these little posts where you had hooks that you would hang the animals in order to be flayed. Those 3 areas. Those 3 areas weren't identified. So we have to apportion the space between those 2 different areas, and the Gemara doesn't tell us how, but that's why we have Rashi. So Rashi tells us how. Rashi says, well, the shulchanos, you had like 2 sets of 4 shulchanos that were parallel to each other, going north to south. Each shulchan had to take up at least 1 amos. So therefore, we know that space, it had to be at least 4 amos. It had to be 4 amos. So therefore, that's going to take me to a total of how much? A total of 114 amos. So now I have a 21 amos left over in order to get from 114 to 35. So obviously the logical thing is split it in half. Split it in half. So you're going to say 10 and a half amos. So we're going to fill in from the space between the southern wall and the ramp, and 10 and a half amos is going to be the space of the nanasin of the little post. Well, if you do that, so then it's going to turn out that the total space when you're going from the northern wall to the outer part of the Mizbeach is going to be a total of 62 and a half amos. The midpoint is 67 and a half amos. So the vast majority of the Mizbeach, namely 27 amos, of the 32 amos of the Mizbeach is going to be on the southern side. And the only part of the Mizbeach that's going to be on the northern side is the 5 amos, going from the 67 and a half amos midpoint to another, 5 amos, which would be, let's say, 72 and a half amos going from south to north. That's where you would have the northern end of the Mizbeach. So it would follow, according to the calculations of Maseches Midos, that the vast majority of the Mizbeach was actually on the southern side, and it would have also, according to Rashi's calculations, enabled one to be able to see a little bit, from the outer portion of the Mizbeach. You would have been able to see, because the outer portion of the Mizbeach didn't go up 9 amos, because you had the Yesod on the very outer amma, and then you had the Sovev on the next amma, which only went up 1 amma or 6 amos respectively. So you would have been able to, especially since the entire elevation at this point only been 13 and a half amos, even over the Sovev, you would have been able to see half an amma, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, it doesn't work out according to Avodah Rabba's calculation. And then Rashi has all kinds of kashas. How do we know that you apportion it 10 and a half amos this way and 10 and a half amos that way? But we're not going to go into that. So, he gives some sort of a teretz. And if you're going to argue that Midos is going to according to Rabbi Yehuda, this doesn't work out, because he held that the Mizbeach was smack in the middle of the Azara and not mostly on the southern side. Mizbeach was the Mishkachas Lake. Haruba the Mizbeach with Dom Kai. The majority of the Mizbeach was actually on the southern side. Rather, we see that it only makes sense if we say, like we had said originally, which is convenient, that the Mishnayos and Midos are going according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Now, just to conclude, Rashi does have another possible interpretation, which he records on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. He says, "Ve'enai nira lefarish." Because of the various kashas that he has, how do we know that we really have to split up, the remaining 25 amos specifically in this fashion? So it's not going to work according to Rabbi Yehuda. So he says that maybe what Rabbi Barabba was saying at the beginning was really that when we had our original kasha on Tesavavam and base, that we had a contradiction between Maseches Tamid and Maseches Midos. So we said, we can resolve the contradiction, because Maseches Midos is going like is going like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So another way of resolving the stira is just to say that not that Maseches Midos is going like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, but that Maseches Tamid is going like Rabbi Yehuda. That Rabbi Yehuda is the one who has the stama in Maseches Tamid, because we know that Maseches Midos doesn't work out according to Rabbi Yehuda, since according to Maseches Midos, the majority of the Mizbeach is on the southern side. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the Mizbeach is right in the middle of the Azara. So therefore, we see that Maseches Tamid must be the Maseches Midos is not going according to Rabbi Yehuda, and it must be the Maseches Tamid is going according to Rabbi Yehuda. But either way, we've been able to resolve our stira by pointing out that the stam tanoim of Maseches Tamid and Maseches Midos are not identical, and that's why we can understand the fact that there's a contradiction between the Mishnayos of Maseches Tamid and the Mishnayos of Maseches Midos in certain details. And we will end here for today. Mr. Hashem will pick up tomorrow on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph.